Dean Carolyn Wu, who has been the Dean of the Mendoza College of Business since 1997. Prior to coming here, Dean Wu was the Associate Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Purdue, the school at which she did her undergraduate and graduate study. Her research focuses on strategy, on entrepreneurship, and on organizational systems. She is a member of 3 corporate boards. She's a member of the Board of Regents of our sister Holy Cross University, the University of Portland in Oregon, and she is an elected member of the Board of Catholic Relief Services. Dean Wu and her husband, David Bartkus, have 2 children, Brian and Justin, both of whom are Notre Dame graduates, so she's very familiar with what it's like to be in places like where you're sitting right now. So let's give Dean Wu a big welcome.
I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here to spend some time with the students. I know that all of you are first-year studies and looking at sort of whether business is for you or not. And I just want to say, please don't feel bad if you decided after this course that business is not for you. In my family, my husband is an engineer. My 2 sons who went to Notre Dame, one is a theology major, the other is a biology major. So there's nobody else in business in the home. So, just feel free to explore. I just want to, first of all, get a sense, and all of you should have a green sheet of paper. How many of you think that business could actually be a vocation? A lot of times people think you go into business because that's where the jobs are good or where you probably develop skills that would be very useful. But thinking a bit broader, how many of you think that actually business can be a vocation in the same way that social work? A lot of times we would identify that as a vocation, or even the priesthood as a vocation, the way we use the word vocation. So how many of you think that business can be a vocation? Those of you who think yes, just, hold up your green sheet. Those of you who don't think so, just leave your hands down. I just want to have a sense from the green sheet people to have a sense of sort of those of you who think business can be a vocation. All right? Leave it up there for a minute. Gentlemen, you're in the red. You didn't have your hand up. Tell me why you don't think business is a vocation. All right. Leave those up. Don't change your mind just because I go after you. Anybody else who don't have your hand up? Oh, you in the white shirt.
I think of business as part of like a bunch of different fields or vocations, I guess. So that's why I don't think of it as like a specific one.
So, because it's a separate field. Now, social work is very different than, for example, medicine, which some people may think of as vocation. Why isn't business vocation? You want to pass on to somebody next to you who didn't have their hand up? Sure. Your buddy in the brown jacket.
Oh, I have mine up.
You have your okay, keep those hands up because then otherwise they go to you. All right. Nobody is going to help you out there. All right. Let's just go for somebody else. Oh, you didn't have your hand up. You didn't have a green sheet. All right. Okay. So it's hard to find. All right. This is slim pickings. Nobody there, actually. All right, the poor soul, she's the one standing up for this. Oh, do you not have a green sheet or you don't think business is a vocation? Both. Okay. Why not? Why is business not a vocation?
Well, I usually think of vocation as something that you're meant to do. And I think business is like, it's something that's integrated in everyday life. Business is everywhere, but I don't think that I don't think that anybody's really meant to do business as their life's calling.
Really?
Yeah.
What is your life's calling?
That's a big one. I don't know, to change the world.
Okay, but not through business.
Through business, but I don't think that's like what I'm meant to do in my life, like the number one thing.
All right. For those of you who think that business is a vocation, by the way, I'm using the microphone because they said they are taping. For those of you who think that business is a vocation, why do you think so?
Because I believe that through business you have an opportunity to make like a change for the greater good in the community. Like outside of just your business, you can impact things outside of that business as a whole and make a lot of other things better.
Anybody else want to add to that? Anybody else want to add to that? He said business can do some good. Talk about why business can do some good?
Sure. Well, I think that one of the reasons it would be a vocation is, like he said, that it helps you, or if you're called to do something greater, business is a great avenue for that. So it's not necessarily that business itself is a vocation, but it's what you can do with it that is what is vocational about it.
Can you give an example of a good that can be done with business?
Well, if you produce a good a physical good, not just a common good, a physical product that benefits people. Let's say it's a new kind of medicine or a new kind of manufacturing technique that allows people to consume something that is cheaper or makes their quality of life increase. That would definitely fall into that category, and I think that that's what a lot of businessmen seek to do.
Okay. Anybody else about why business could be a vocation here? Anybody wants to add anything? How about you? Anything to add? No? He covered it. All right, let's just talk a little bit about, first of all, we actually think of business as a vocation here at Notre Dame. A vocation, I guess, is a type of engagement that allows you to really do good for society. You know, at least in my mind, that vocation is not just self-serving, but is an engagement in activities that could really bring about the good of society, the welfare of other people. And why do I think that business is a vocation? First of all, you hear a lot of people sort of questioning whether free markets are good or whether free markets can be exploitative. And didn't free markets, for example, create sort of the issues that we saw in a financial crisis? And I just want to say free markets, first of all, is about exchange. Because we are made to be social, relational beings. We are meant to live in community and live in society. And that exchange becomes a very important way of how we live in society, is that I have something and you have something, and together we exchange, something could be better off. In a free market, there's just really three basic principles. The first thing is that we believe in property rights. And so if you buy a house, and if you invest money in it, that house is yours. If you have title to a car, that car is yours. Nobody can take it from you. So you could actually have possessions. And by the way, the church does not condemn having possessions. And so the first thing is that in free markets is premised on the fact that property rights are recognized. There are parts in the world where you live in a village and you could be evacuated, and you cannot really, ownership is not respected. It could be taken away. So the first thing is property rights. The second is that we believe in contracts, that when we exchange and if we have a contract between us, that contract is enforceable. All right, so you have some protection when you enter into some type of exchange. And the third is that these exchanges are all voluntary. If I'm going to invest in a company, I'm going to give you my money and you are going to give me a share of your company, that exchange is voluntary. There's nothing forced. If I choose to work for you, it's voluntary. I'm not forced labor, and you're not forced to hire me. So the free markets that we operate in, while there may be a lot of abuses, which I would take up in a little bit, it's really premised on very simple thing. It's really a system of exchange that in the end, in a free market and capital markets, as you know it, is really premised on property rights, on the legal contracts being honored, and finally on voluntary activity. The reason that business is a vocation is that think about a world where there is no business. all right, where there are no products, or the products that you can produce will be by your own hand with your own resources in the little space that you're in. There will be no goods produced, no services beyond the most immediate of a tribal context. So one reason is that, to the extent that business produce goods, which are truly good, and produce services which really serve, that's very important to humankind, right? Not all goods are good. Not all services do serve, right? But we do know that in our daily life, we need a lot of goods which are truly good and services which do serve. That's one reason, therefore, why business is a vocation, because it has the potential to really do good for other people. And in addition to, through products and services, it also organizes work, right? Work is very important. And so, what are the sectors where there is work? There's the government sector, basically. There's the business sector, and then there's self-employment, right? And so if there's no business, then the opportunities for people to work and organize how they would use their talents, how they would develop their talents, it would be very much confined to very narrow sort of opportunities. Not to mention that there are studies that show that countries that trade with each other tend to sort of exist in harmony rather than go to war. And right now, we have a lot of tension with China, our trade tensions and so on. And actually, it's good sometimes to have these tensions because in the scope of activities, these are the garden varieties, sort of my interest versus your interest, and how are we going to resolve those. In a system where a country is highly isolated, where there is no exchange, it actually becomes a very, very sort of dangerous entity. And one of the best examples is, of course, North Korea. Right? It just becomes isolated. It's there sitting as a threat. And that whereas where there are exchanges, you actually to some degree want to maintain the well-being of your trading partner, your counterparty. And so if you think about sort of these things are fairly complex. The Chinese on the one hand, want the U.S. to some degree be somewhat healthy because they want to sell to us and is holding a lot of U.S. bonds, and they would want us to be able to sort of deliver on our promises or be able to buy products. Now, that's not always the best incentive, but at least there is some type of incentive among trading partners that it is helpful in some ways to have a rapport and have this type of relationship. And give you another example of why business is so important. You're in the midst of going through some of these, the youth revolution in Tunisia, in Egypt, and so on. There are a number of reasons for these revolts. One is, of course, dictatorship and oppression. I mean, there is just severe oppression. But another most important reason, too, is that there are no jobs. In a lot of these places, there's 60%, 45 to 70% unemployment. On top of it, where young people meaning under 30, accounts for 60% of the population. When you have those three conditions there, when you have severe oppression, if you have lack of economic opportunity and a very young population, those three factors combine and could create sort of havoc, all right? Just to give you some sense of that. So this is the reason why the role of business is recognized not only by us here as a vocation, but it's actually recognized by the church as an important institution and with positive benefits. And let me just read you a couple of short quotes from the most recent encyclical. There are other encyclicals, which are the letters and teachings from the Pope, which cite, the role of markets and the role of business. This one is the most recent encyclical, which is called Caritas in Veritate, Charity in Truth, where at one point Pope Benedict said, the institutional or the political path to charity, here it refers then to political and economic institutions. The institutional and political path to charity is no less excellent and effective than a kind of charity which encounters the neighbor directly. So basically, a lot of times we think about charity as interpersonal between you and me, a giver and a receiver. But what the Pope basically says that there is the institutional political path, which are really about institutions, business being one of those, which is no less excellent, no less effective than the kind of personal charity. And in fact, to live our faith is not just an interpersonal or personal manifestation. They ought to also be manifested in that society's institutions. And further on, he has a quote that says, the church has always held that economic activity is not to be regarded as something opposed to society. Society does not have to protect itself from the market, as if the development of the latter, the market, were ipso facto to entail the death of authentically human relations. Now, those are very powerful statements to say the church has always held that economic action is not to be regarded as something opposed to society. It's not business versus society. He said that's not the way we should think about it. And society does not have to protect itself from the market, as if the development of the market would cause the death of authentic, genuine human relations. All right? So a lot of times we think about markets as impersonal, it's transactional, it breeds greed, and so on and so forth. It seems to be the antipathy of what we think of as sort of genuine, caring, whatever relationship. The church says that is not the case. Market by itself is not evil. And so it's not business versus society. It's not like society got to protect itself against against business per se. So this is very important for those of you who are considering business, because I know a lot of times people say, oh, you're going into business. That's because you're greedy. And people who say things like that ignore the fact of the incredible good that business can do. And in fact, I give a talk, and I think a lot of our students actually pick up that line, and that is, business is not a necessary evil. Business is a necessary good. Right? However, taking us to part 2, and I'm going to take a look at the time. How am I doing on time? Nobody knows? Okay, I'll check myself. However, we do know that there have been corporate failures. There have been a lot of misconduct. People have used the market in a ways that create self-interest, that create a lot of gains on their part, while the burden and the cost and the failure and the job loss are absorbed by somebody else. We know that in the market, that there are failures in the market. And basically, because I don't have a lot of time, the whole issue about markets is market is no more than just a medium for exchange. Whether markets can deliver the good or markets deliver the evil, what does it depend on? What does it depend on? Whether markets do good or markets do bad things, what does it depend on? I heard it needs to be louder. People, all right? And so markets really depend on the people who are in the exchange. You and I are in an exchange. I could choose to do justice by you. I could choose to pay you a fair wage. I could choose to give you work which has dignity, or I could choose something very terrible. I could choose to cheat you. I could choose to give you a product that really doesn't deliver to the promises. I could give you a product that is actually bad for you. And so whether markets could deliver on the potential depends completely on people. And in fact, the Pope's encyclical went on to say, this is a long encyclical, so I'm just going to pick up a few pieces, where it says, markets cannot rely on itself, because it is not able to produce by itself something that lies outside its competence. It must draw its moral energies from other subjects that are capable of generating them. So he said, the morality of markets is not supplied by the market, but it's supplied by the people, because only people have moral energies. So whether markets work well or not depends on the people who are involved in that exchange. Instruments that are good in themselves can thereby be transformed into harmful ones. It is man's darkened reason that produces these consequences, not the instrument per se. Right? So he goes back to put the responsibilities basically on us, on you who will eventually, some of you who will decide to go into business and succeed in that arena. But basically he said it depends on the people, not the instrument. So you could be in teaching, you could be in healthcare, you could be in a legal profession, you could be a journalist, you could still stand to do harms. As we know, we have journalists who made up stories, we have lawyers who overcharge, we have doctors who were not attentive. We have doctors who were self-interested, who provided drugs where they received some type of benefits for. So the bottom line really is not the instrument per se, in this case markets and business, which we have demonstrated that actually can create a lot of goods, but the people who are engaged in that business. And that's why your education here at the Mendoza College of Business, those of you who want to go forward, there is a very strong orientation towards ethical leadership. And it's actually not in one class per se. Students who have gone through it would say it sort of runs through the whole curriculum. Because in the end, we believe that we really need business for society to prosper. That business is a necessary good. But for it to deliver on its potential, it requires people. And so at this point, I just want to show you a little video, which is the point of view from the Mendoza College of Business about business. Here we see opportunity. Here we find hope. Here, the call for a new way of leading. A fresh vision of a better way of doing things, of changing lives, and in doing so, changing the world. Business is powerful. Just 300 multinational companies control 25% of the world's assets. Business can solve some of the most pressing problems afflicting the human community by providing jobs, healthcare, education, even peace. But to find answers, we need to ask more of business.
It's actually not enough to want to do the right thing. You actually have to do the right thing. So wanting is one step, but then you have to translate that desire to do well into action. Moral preparation is going to be part of that, and moral courage is certainly a second step.
People look for every decision, every nuance. That cynicism comes out, and they say, why are you doing it that way? And over time, doesn't take long, people will find out if you're real or you're only in it for yourself. And great companies are teams. And there aren't any individual superstars.
Financial reporting needs to be more timely, more truthful, and more transparent. As a business leader, you need to remember those you're accountable to: shareholders, employees, creditors, customers, and the larger community.
To be a real leader in today's business requires not just a deep understanding of your own firm's operation and the competitive economic environment in which you operate, but also a knowledge of the broader impact on people's lives. Businesses ultimately produce and distribute goods and services to mankind, and so successful businesses will ultimately be judged by their contribution to the world community.
When we were in Bosnia and Lebanon, we saw was physical damage from the war, but also a damage to the spirit of people.
But we also saw rebuilding. We heard stories of hope from business leaders, and we saw that business really is the way back to a decent, peaceful life.
Let us use this opportunity to inspire our students, to enable them to see how they, through business, can become solutions to issues as big as poverty and peace, and also as routine as a safe work environment, the training of a worker, payday with something left over for savings, a day of schooling for a young African girl, a meal to come home to, and fuel and clean water that make these possible.
You know, people often talk about challenges, but what we should do is to wrap our minds around the concept of opportunity. The Chinese think of opportunities as the intersection of problems with readiness. And to be ready, we must ask more of business and ask more of ourselves. At the Mendoza College of Business, University of Notre Dame, we will step up in 3 ways. One is to foster the sense of personal integrity grounded in rigorous problem solving. The second is to cultivate the organizational culture and systems that will lead to the right actions. And third is to advocate for business to succeed in a way that advances the well-being of our planet and of the people of the planet.
Ask more of business.
Ask more of me.
Ask more of business.
Ask more of me.
Ask more of me.
Ask more of me.
Ask more.
Ask more.
Ask more.
Ask more of business. Ask more of yourselves.
So I think my half hour is up. I just want to say some of you will become business majors, some of you may not. Many of you will work in a business sector, whether you are a business major or not. Some of you may not work in a business sector. But whatever you choose to do, again, to remind yourself that choose a profession that really allows you to exercise your interests and your talent for the good of other people. So you're at Notre Dame. This is our mission. And this is an extraordinary education, so there's no reason to shoot for anything less. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your class. Thank you.